Sometimes fate challenges us in the most unexpected places, even around a poker table. This story plunges you into a whirlwind of passion, conflict, and unanswered questions that begin with a casual game of cards but quickly spiral into a battle for love, honor, and family bonds. The protagonist, a master of his craft and a man of principles, finds himself in a true-life drama where pride clashes with betrayal, and every decision carries unpredictable consequences. This evening will mark a turning point, not only for him, but for everyone he holds dear. Are you ready to uncover the secrets hidden behind the facade of family traditions and friendships? My dear friend, be sure to subscribe to my channel if this is your first time here, and give your royal like to this video. Every now and then, my brothers-in-law and I arrange a poker night. It's not something we do often, just a handful of times each year. Recently, our wives decided to go on a group shopping trip, which created the perfect opportunity for us to enjoy some poker. My wife, Nina, has both a brother and a sister. On this particular evening, her brother, Christian Jackson, invited Lewis Westbrook to join our game, which was hosted at Chris's house. Chris sat to my left, while Lewis took the seat directly across from me. Both of them work as attorneys at Jackson, Preston, and Peterson, the most prestigious law firm in the area. Nina's father, Jacob Jackson, was one of the founding partners of the firm. Years ago, Jacob gained full ownership, making it a business entirely controlled by the Jackson family. Nina and her sister Peggy, who everyone in the family calls Peg, are also attorneys. Peg married Edward Powell, a civil engineer who was seated to my right that night. Edward's a solid guy, especially for someone in his line of work, and we've always gotten along well. Meanwhile, Nina ended up with me, Flynn Walker. I'm neither Irish nor a lawyer, two facts that caused considerable friction within the Jackson family. If not for her mother, Sally, inexplicably liking me, I doubt I would have survived the constant critiques from Jacob and Chris. I'm a mason by trade, working with brick, mortar, blocks, and concrete. My father was a mason before me, and I never wanted to pursue any other career. Although he urged me to attend school to hone my craft, I initially resisted. My father's skill was legendary. He could lay a perfect line of blocks, level and square, with unmatched precision. At the time, I thought working under his guidance was all the training I needed, but I eventually realized the trade was more complex than I'd anticipated. After 2 years of formal education, I joined him in his business. That schooling helped us refine both our techniques and materials. I seized every opportunity to modernize and improve our operations. I introduced my dad to new methods for handling brick and block, while he taught me the enduring value of craftsmanship over shortcuts. Together, we maintained top-notch quality while boosting efficiency. As demand grew, we hired 3 employees to keep up with the workload. By the time I turned 27, I was a partner in a thriving business, and that's when I met Nina. A supplier had taken our deposit, but failed to deliver the materials we'd ordered. Frustrated, I sought legal help at the Jackson law firm. Nina, who was 26 at the time and the most stunning woman I'd ever seen, was assigned to handle our case. Thanks to her expertise, we recovered our money without even stepping into a courtroom. By the time the case was resolved, I was completely infatuated. Whenever a payment was delayed or an order didn't come through, I conveniently suggested we needed legal assistance. "Flynn, for heaven's sake," my father finally said one day as we worked on a sprawling house in the Poconos. "Why don't you just ask her out? It'll save us a fortune and stop you from driving everyone crazy." He added with a chuckle, "We can't keep suing everyone just so you can see that red-haired lawyer." I was floored. How did he know my true motives? I thought I'd been subtle. "You think I can't tell?" My dad laughed. "That girl's got you hooked. I was the same way with your mom, but I didn't need excuses. I just kept asking her out until she said yes." "But she's a lawyer, Dad," I argued. "I'm just a mason. Why would someone like her be interested in me?" "She won't be if you keep doubting yourself," he said firmly. "Women appreciate confidence. You're a damn good mason, and there's no shame in making an honest living. She probably deals with enough smooth talkers in her line of work. Be genuine. Ask her out like it's the most natural thing in the world. And if she says no, ask her again next week." He confided that it had taken him 2 months to convince my mom to go on a date with him. I spent the next week reflecting on his advice. Funny how things change. At 17, I thought my dad knew nothing. A decade later, he seemed like a fountain of wisdom. That Friday, I parked outside Nina's office, still wearing my dusty work clothes. I didn't dare risk going home to clean up and losing my nerve. When she came out, I approached her. "Hi, Nina," I began. "I'm Flynn Walker. I'm not sure if you remember me." Nina smiled. "Of course I remember you, Flynn. Are you having more issues with suppliers?" "Actually, the only thing I've been thinking about is you," I admitted. "Would you like to have dinner with me or maybe see a movie?" Before she could reply, a voice interrupted. "I hope you plan to shower first," it said. I turned to see her brother, Chris, walking toward us. He'd overheard what I thought was a private conversation. "So, sis, are you really going out with this hard-working guy? Maybe he'll take you to McDonald's and a documentary on the Hoover Dam." I quickly realized this was Nina's brother. Reacting physically would have been a mistake, so I focused on keeping my dignity intact. Then I remembered my dad's words. "Nina, will you go out with me?" I asked again, holding my ground. She glanced at Chris, who was smirking, and then back at me. Without a word, she took my hand and pulled me aside. "Let's take a walk, Flynn," she said, her tone firm. "We don't need an audience for this." We wandered to a nearby park, where she motioned for me to sit with her on a bench. "Flynn, you've just met my brother Chris," she began. "I have deep affection for him, but his insufferable arrogance and self-centered nature can make him hard to bear. Oddly, he reminds me of my father. Whenever someone, be it a young boy in the past or a grown man now, arrives to take me out, the two of them behave like a pair of territorial wolves. If I decide to date you, be prepared for their sharp tongues and biting comments. Neither my sister Peggy's suitors nor mine have ever measured up to their impossible standards." Nina sighed heavily. "You should seriously consider whether being with me is worth enduring my family's antics. I'm sharing this with you because I genuinely want to go out with you, but I also want to spare you from the trouble they'll create. If meeting Chris and hearing about my family has changed your mind, I'll completely understand," she finished. "Does 7 o'clock work for you?" I nodded. That marked the beginning of a love story riddled with challenges. Her father and brother were, without question, the most challenging duo I'd ever faced. They made it their mission to discourage me, yet my feelings for Nina only grew stronger. A year and a half later, we were married. Over time, even the unyielding Jacob and Chris began to accept me. The arrival of our 2 children, Sharon and Earl, went a long way in bridging the gap. It's amusing how even the most unwelcome son-in-law can become a cherished family member once grandchildren enter the picture. From the start, Nina's mother, Sally, had been my staunch supporter. Though I never fully understood her unwavering kindness, I valued it deeply. 17 years into our marriage, Sally treats me as if I were her own son. Usually, Nina's cousin occupies the 4th seat in our card games, but this time he couldn't join us. Chris had invited his friend Louis instead, a decision bound to stir up trouble. Louis was a grating presence, overconfident, prone to bragging, and utterly convinced of his charm. Adding fuel to the fire, Louis was Chris's closest friend and had briefly dated Nina before she attended law school. Louis's company was insufferable. "During my 6 months in Montrose, I hooked up with at least 10 women," he bragged unabashedly. 7 of them were married. There's nothing quite like the thrill of being with someone else's wife." "That's reckless, Louis," Eddie interjected. "You're jeopardizing your life, your career, and your reputation." Louis chuckled dismissively. "No risk, no reward. If anything, my reputation as a bad boy only works in my favor. Men see me as a threat and women find me intriguing. They think I'm daring and come to me for advice." "One day, you'll tangle with the wrong woman," Eddie warned. "She'll tell her husband, and you'll find yourself in real trouble." "Jacob won't be in charge much longer," Louis replied, brushing off the caution. "Chris will take over soon, and he won't care about petty complaints from jealous husbands. Isn't that right, Chris?" Chris hesitated. "I'd support you where I could, Louis, but it's better not to put yourself in such situations. My sisters will also have a strong say in the firm's direction." Lewis's grin turned sly. Then I'll just have to win them over. Furious, I slammed my cards on the table and stood. I'm done. I won't sit here and listen to this garbage. Lewis smirked. Don't blame me if you can't keep your wife happy. I'm just satisfying the needs of neglected women, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nina were one of them. Fury surged through me as I leaned over the table. You miserable excuse for a man. If you so much as glance at Nina the wrong way, you'll regret it. Chris and Eddie tried to calm me down. Lewis is just messing around, Chris said, attempting to diffuse the tension. Don't take him seriously, Flynn. Like hell I'm joking, Lewis snapped. A bricklayer like him wouldn't know how to satisfy a woman. Women want power and sophistication, not— I cut him off with a glare. Stay away from Nina. Lewis's smirk deepened. Oh, I'll take you up on that challenge. Give it a few weeks and she'll be in my bed. By the time I'm done, she'll forget you even exist. I lunged toward him, but Chris and Eddie restrained me. Don't let him get to you, Eddie urged. Nina wouldn't give him the time of day. Well, screw you too, Eddie, Lewis shouted. For that, I'll go after Peggy as well. I'll show both of them what it's like to be with a real man. His face twisted in anger, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I held Eddie back. If anyone was going to handle Louis, it would be me. This game is over, Chris declared firmly. I'm asking everyone to leave. We all need to cool off. He was right. It was his house, and his decision was fair. I've always believed that when someone asks you to leave their home, you respect their wishes. Eddie and I left, still simmering with frustration. I chose not to tell Nina about the incident immediately. I needed time to cool down and decide on my next steps. One thing was certain. If Lewis caused trouble for my family, he would regret it. By Monday evening, Nina greeted me at the door with a cold beer and a barrage of questions. I heard you left the card game early on Saturday. What happened? She asked directly. I'm a terrible liar, and I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head. Chris asked Eddie and me to leave, I said simply. Nina raised an eyebrow. There's more to it than that, isn't there? You confronted Lewis, didn't you? I wouldn't call it a confrontation, I replied evenly. It was more of a warning. No man talks about my wife that way and gets away with it. Nina shook her head. I doubt Lewis said anything like that, Flynn. He recounted every detail of how combative you were toward him. According to him, your jealousy still stems from my history with him, long before you entered my life. Chris appears to completely support Lewis's version of events. Did you lose your temper and overreact to a harmless comment? For reasons I can't quite grasp, Chris seems so enamored with Lewis's narrative that he's lost his objectivity. Both of them seem utterly convinced that your father's time at the company is nearing its conclusion, and that Chris is poised to take the reins, with Louis as his right-hand man, charming Chris's sisters and everyone else who matters. That's essentially the heart of their discussion. I remained composed and said, Flynn, I don't believe that's accurate. Peg and I share equal responsibility in decisions about the business, and Chris knows that. Nina reasoned that Lewis must also be aware of this fact. That's likely why he's working so hard to influence you and Peg to align with his agenda. It seems he believes that if he can win over the Jackson sisters, they'll indulge his ambitions just to keep him around. From Lewis's perspective, it seems like your fate is already sealed. But Flynn, Chris is my brother. He would never support Lewis's words or actions, Nina insisted. You're making too much of this. I've never seen you this jealous. I stepped closer, lifting Nina by her arms until her face was mere inches from mine. Nina, my love for you is deeper than you could ever imagine, but I won't tolerate betrayal, and I certainly won't stand by while that man tries to undermine my family. Don't mistake my patience for weakness. I understand Chris is your brother and you love him, but don't let Lewis's manipulations cloud your judgment, I warned her. Nina suddenly laughed. Oh, big, strong Flynn Walker holding me like this. Do you think you scare me? I know you love me and would never harm me. Her voice softened, taking on a playful tone. The kids are staying at Mom's tonight, so you'd better put me down or show me why I don't need anyone else. Your call. That was always Nina's way. She'd push me to my limits with her antics and then flip the script, demanding my full attention. It was her way of keeping me engaged, and it worked every time. I carried her to the bedroom, leaving no room for doubt that I was the only man she'd ever need. At least that's what I told myself. Nina never failed to affirm my belief that my love for her was unparalleled. Still, over time, a nagging doubt took root. The realization that Nina rarely brought up Louis anymore. Given that they worked together daily, her silence felt strange. Meanwhile, my bond with Eddie, my brother-in-law, had grown stronger after the infamous card game incident. Eddie had been furious when Louis implied that Peg might be unfaithful. The accusation struck a deep nerve. Whenever Eddie and I met, we dissected Louis's behavior and speculated about his motives. Eddie confided that he'd enlisted Nancy Wall, Jacob's longtime secretary, to discreetly observe Louis. Nancy, who held no fondness for Louis, readily agreed. So far, her findings revealed nothing out of the ordinary, but that lack of evidence only deepened my unease. The idea that Louis might genuinely change didn't sit well with me. I made an effort to stay close to Nina, giving her extra attention, which she seemed to appreciate. She reciprocated in her own affectionate ways during our evenings together. As the family prepared for Sally and Jacob's 50th wedding anniversary, Nina took charge of much of the planning alongside Peg, with occasional assistance from Chris and his wife Bridget. Chris had met Bridget during a summer job at the firm, and unlike Eddie and me, Bridget's place in the family had never been questioned. Her last name, Russell, carried a weight that Eddie's Powell never did. The celebration was scheduled for Friday, July 15th, the exact day of Sally and Jacob's golden anniversary. As the date drew closer, Nina became increasingly anxious. She spent countless hours at her parents' house and on the phone, meticulously managing every detail. Her thoroughness, a trait that made her an excellent lawyer, extended to personal events like this, ensuring nothing would go wrong. Around midday on the day of the party, Eddie called me. "Flynn, Nancy just reached out. She overheard Louis setting up a meeting at the Tuck Him In for 3 p.m. I'm not sure where Peg is, and if I ask, she'll just say she's busy with last-minute errands. Do you know where Nina is?" I replied, "She mentioned picking up flowers and handling a few final details. I'll leave the office early and check out the motel. I'll let you know what I find." "That's not going to cut it," Eddie snapped. "I'll be at the coffee shop near my office. Swing by and grab me on your way." It wasn't exactly on my way, and we were already pressed for time. Still, Eddie had been keeping me informed. "Fine," I said. "Be ready when I pull up. We can't afford delays." By 2:50 p.m., I reached the coffee shop and picked up Eddie. Without wasting a moment, I merged back into traffic and headed toward the motel. At exactly 2:59 p.m., we parked at a convenience store near the small, outdated building. It was a modest place with about 20 rooms, all facing the front lot. I killed the engine and scanned the area. "There he is," Eddie said, pointing. There was something insufferable about the man's cheery demeanor, wasn't there? Louis hummed a jaunty tune as he marched toward a room, swiping a keycard with a practiced flick before slipping inside and shutting the door behind him. Eddie turned to face me, his expression speaking volumes without a word. What was our next move? I weighed the possibilities. Should we confront him outright? But what if the person he was meeting had nothing to do with us? Worse still, what if she hadn't even arrived yet? We were operating without a proper plan, diving headlong into chaos. "Eddie, I'm not about to make a reckless decision that gets us locked up," I murmured, trying to rein in my own impatience. "Let's just see what happens next," I added. "If the damage is done, we can't undo it by charging in now." Eddie gave a curt nod, his agreement evident. "Exactly. Besides, let's not kid ourselves. This probably isn't Louis's first stunt. God help us if it's one of our wives." We stayed where we were, the minutes dragging by with agonizing slowness. At last, Louis emerged, locking the door and hurrying off to his car. He drove away quickly, leaving Eddie and me in watchful silence. Not long after, the door opened again, and a woman stepped out. "You've got to be joking," Eddie muttered, his voice rising as we both recognized her. It was Nina, darting along the side of the building. My chest constricted painfully, every beat of my heart echoing in my ears. In that instant, the stable ground beneath my life seemed to collapse. Eddie turned to me. "Flynn, "Let me handle this," he said, his tone steady but urgent. "She probably just made a horrible mistake and already regrets it." My jaw tightened. "Oh, she'll regret it soon enough," I growled, starting the truck and pulling out of the lot. Eddie kept trying to calm me as we made our way to his office. "If the shoe were on the other foot, Eddie, what would you do?" I asked, my frustration boiling over as he climbed out of the vehicle. "Honestly, I'd act impulsively and regret it later. But that's me," he admitted. "You're better than that, Flynn. Think of the kids, if nothing else." "Why didn't Nina think of the kids?" I snapped, my anger sharpening. "Look, do what you need to," Eddie said, raising his hands in surrender as he stepped away. I parked outside a nearby bar, searching for something, anything, to ground myself. A few beers later, clarity was still nowhere to be found. I wasn't exactly known for intricate strategies. My approach had always been simple: charge ahead and deal with the fallout. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But this situation felt beyond me. Sitting there, the reality of Nina's importance in my life hit me like a freight train. She was more than just my partner. She was my anchor, my compass. And now I felt unmoored, adrift. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Nina. "Flynn, where are you? You're supposed to be at Mom's. It's past 5 and everyone's waiting," she said, her voice sharp. For a split second, I considered telling her exactly where she could go. Instead, an idea struck me. Why not confront her here and now, in front of her family? Let them see the truth and let her father, Jacob, stew over it. Still in my work clothes, I drove to her parents' estate. The sight of Lewis's sleek Mercedes parked by the curb made the fire in my chest burn hotter. This was about to get very interesting. "Flynn, let me get you a drink. My treat," Eddie called out as I walked into the backyard, clearly trying to preempt a scene. I ignored him, scanning the crowd for Nina or Lewis. Instead, I encountered Sally. "Flynn, you made it. It wouldn't be the same without you," she said warmly, pulling me into a hug. I returned her smile, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Sally's kindness was genuine, but even she couldn't shield me from the storm brewing inside. Over her shoulder, I spotted Louis at the bar, gesturing animatedly as he entertained a group with some exaggerated story. I brushed past Sally and headed straight for him. Lewis's confident grin faltered the moment he saw me. He set his drink down, his posture shifting defensively as I closed the distance. "I warned you," I said through clenched teeth. "Now it's time to settle this." Before I could make another move, his fist connected with my chin, the force snapping my head back. A sharp pain shot through my neck. Regaining my footing, I fixed him with a grim smile. "So she told you everything," Lewis sneered. "Knew she couldn't keep quiet." He swung again, landing a solid hit on the side of my face. The gathered crowd fell into stunned silence. Though I wasn't exactly beloved by the Jackson family, Lewis's insults about Nina at her own family's event crossed a line. I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against a nearby shed with enough force to make it rattle. Holding him in place with one hand, I drew back my fist, ready to end his smug arrogance. "Flynn!" Nina's voice cut through the tension, firm and commanding. It wasn't a shout, but it stopped me cold. My fist froze, hovering inches from Lewis's face. "Nina, I'll deal with you later," I rasped, not taking my eyes off Louis. She stepped closer, her hand resting on my arm. "Deal with me later?" she repeated, disbelief dripping from her tone. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Flynn, but you'll deal with me right now." "This scumbag admitted everything, Nina. Not that it matters, I saw you leave that motel," I said, my voice tight with rage. Her expression faltered, the weight of my words hitting her like a punch to the gut. She raised her chin boldly, her gaze boring into mine with a fierce determination. "If you really think I'd betray you for someone like him, or anyone else for that matter, then do it. Punish me. I've earned it if I've done what you're accusing me of. Hit me, if that's what it takes to prove your point, tough guy." Her voice wavered slightly, her vulnerability exposed in a way I'd never seen before. Her lips quivered as she spoke, her words trembling under the weight of restrained emotion. She knew how easily she could undo me, how little it would take for my anger to dissolve. And yet, Doubt began gnawing at my certainty, eroding my resolve. If you love me, if you trust me at all, let him go. Let me explain myself. Her voice steadied as she continued. But if I mean so little to you that you discard me over a suspicion, then do what you will. Take your anger out on him. Hit me too, if you must. Any woman who'd cheat on a husband as loyal as you deserves no better. Her words struck deep, leaving me caught between fury and an uneasy uncertainty. Louis stirred at my feet, struggling to rise. If I intended to lash out, the moment was now. But what if Nina was innocent? What if her presence at the motel had a reason I didn't understand? My eyes lingered on her, and I realized I couldn't bring myself to turn away from her. Not after everything we'd shared. Despite my anger, the hold she had on me was undeniable. With a heavy sigh, I released Louis. No sooner had I done so than he threw a wild punch, catching me square in the eye. Pain shot through me and my knees buckled. Nina cursed sharply, and the sound of fists meeting flesh filled the room. Years of witnessing fights had made that sound all too familiar. Nina's arms came around me, steadying me as I fought to stay on my feet. My vision blurred, my left eye nearly useless. Through the haze, I saw Chris Jackson delivering a furious beating to his former best friend. Eddie and a few cousins rushed in, pulling Chris off Louis, whose face was battered and bloody. Chris, flushed and breathless, growled, "Get this coward out of here! If he's still around in 10 seconds, I'll finish the job myself." Several hands dragged Louis out, leaving Chris to turn his attention to me and Nina. He slung an arm over my shoulders and wrapped the other protectively around Nina's waist, guiding us toward the kitchen. Inside, a small group of onlookers lingered near the doorway, their curiosity plain. "Can we have the room? Just Nina, Flynn, and me," Chris said. The room emptied quickly, and he shut the door. Facing Nina, Chris's expression softened. "Bridget told me everything. She admitted it all, including how you stepped in to stop her from making a huge mistake. I'm furious with her, but I respect her for coming clean. I can't believe I ever thought Louis was a friend while he was trying to seduce my wife." "Thank you, Nina," he said, his voice thick with gratitude as he embraced her. I was still dazed from Louis's punch, trying to piece everything together. Louis had been involved with Bridget? And what had Nina done? Chris extended a hand toward me, and though confused, I shook it. "Flynn, I owe you an apology. I should have listened to you and fired Louis after that card game. Eddie told me he saw Nina at the motel, but you couldn't have known she was there to confront Bridget, not to meet Louis." Chris went on. "Apparently, Nina convinced Bridget to leave Louis. She stayed behind to deal with him herself. Peg and I both noticed Louis's slimy behavior over the years, but we shrugged it off. When he started targeting Bridget, I had a bad feeling. I followed her today, and by the time Louis arrived, Bridget was already gone. Nina got him to promise he'd resign and leave for California. In exchange, the firm won't pursue his unethical behavior." Nina added, "I didn't realize Flynn saw me leaving the motel. No wonder he was so furious with Louis." The weight of misunderstanding hit me hard. "Nina, I screwed up. I should have trusted you. I embarrassed you in front of everyone," I admitted. Before Nina could respond, her mother, Sally, entered with Eddie, Peg, and the kids in tow. "Embarrassed her?" Sally laughed. "Everyone thought you were about to kill that lowlife. If Nina hadn't stepped in, Westbrook would have been looking for his head, and you'd be in jail. Not that you didn't have a good reason," she added. "Nina, I'm proud of you for marrying a man like Flynn and for stopping him from doing something he'd regret." Chris interjected, "Mom, weren't you worried about me killing Louis?" Sally waved him off. "Chris, you're a lawyer. Your punches wouldn't do much damage. But Flynn here? His hands are dangerous. Louis was in real trouble for a moment." Peg gestured to my face. "Flynn's eye is swollen shut, and he's got a nasty bruise on his cheek. Got anything for that, Mom?" Sally studied me thoughtfully before addressing Nina. "Take him upstairs, get him in the jacuzzi, and relax. I'll send an ice pack up with one of the kids. Then show him how much you love him," she said with a mischievous grin. "Mom!" Peg exclaimed, mortified. "Is that really appropriate?" Sally chuckled, unbothered. "A strong marriage isn't built on withholding affection, especially when your husband's just defended the family." Go on, Nina. Take care of your man. Less than an hour later, Nina and I rejoined the party, mingling with the guests. Sally's advice had spread, and the teasing was relentless. To my surprise, I found myself thinking she might have a point about marriage after all. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.